We're done watching Leo. If you were a better son, you'd help your sister instead of hoarding your money. My name is Arthur Vance, 46 years old, an urban planner in a city that values brick and steel over blood ties, and I was staring at my phone, the word from my mother burning a cold hole in the quiet of my kitchen. I had just gotten off a frantic call from my son's school. My 6-year-old, Leo, had never been picked up. My parents, who were supposed to get him, weren't answering their phones. I broke every traffic law driving from my downtown office to the school, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, only to find the principal waiting with Leo in the empty front office, my son's face a mask of confusion and fear. He'd been there for 2 hours. 2 hours of him wondering if I was ever coming. Now, after getting him home and settling him with a warm drink and his favorite cartoon, my mother finally texted me back, not with an apology, but with an ultimatum. The text was the culmination of a week-long Cold War that began when I refused to give my younger sister, Chloe, $30,000. She'd called me in tears, spinning a vague story about a can't-miss business opportunity that required an immediate investment. It was the same story she'd used for the last 15 years, with different numbers and different imaginary ventures. I said no, politely but firmly. I explained that my priority was Leo's future, his college fund, the stability I had worked my entire life to build for him after his mother and I divorced. The response had been a torrent of emotional blackmail from Chloe, followed by a week of icy silence from my parents. And now this. They had used my son, their only grandchild, as a pawn in their campaign of coercion. They had intentionally left a 6-year-old child stranded at his school to punish me for my financial prudence. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't call them scream. I walked into the living room and watched Leo, who had finally drifted off to sleep on the sofa, his small chest rising and falling rhythmically. I gently scooped him up, carried him to his bed, and tucked him in, the familiar weight of him in my arms a grounding force in the swirling chaos of my anger. Something inside me, a long-dormant mechanism of self-preservation that I had suppressed for decades in the name of family harmony, finally clicked into place. I walked back to the kitchen, my movements calm and deliberate. I looked at the family photo on the refrigerator, a picture from last summer's family vacation, all of us smiling for the camera. A carefully constructed facade. What my parents and Chloe had always mistaken for passive acceptance was, in reality, patient observation. I'm a planner. I analyze systems, identify weaknesses, and design sustainable structures. I had been analyzing my family's broken system for years. They thought they were holding all the cards. They had no idea that I was the one who had designed the entire game, and that I had written the rules in a language they couldn't even read. I picked up my phone and sent a single, 2-word email to my attorney. The subject line was family trust. The message was simple: execute protocol. My sister Chloe was a black hole of need, and my parents were the twin sons feeding her their light, their warmth, and, most importantly, their money. It had been this way for as long as I could remember. I was the responsible one, the planner, the son who got a scholarship, worked 2 jobs through college, and built a career from the ground up. Chloe was the artist, the free spirit, the one who couldn't be tied down by the mundanity of a 9-to-5 job. That was the narrative, anyway. The reality was that I was stable, and she was a storm of poor decisions and manufactured crises. Her art consisted of half-finished canvases that littered our parents' basement. Her free spirit was a revolving door of bad-news boyfriends and last-minute trips to Bali funded by my father's early retirement fund. I'd lost count of the number of times I'd received a panic call from my mother. Chloe's rent is due, Arthur. She'll be evicted. Chloe's car broke down. She can't get to her auditions. Chloe needs a new laptop for her graphic design course. Each crisis came with an implicit expectation that I, the successful son, would step in and fix it. For the first few years of my career, I did. I paid the rent. I co-signed for the car. I bought the laptop. I did it out of a misguided sense of duty, a belief that this was what a good brother, a good son did. The turning point came 7 years ago, a year after Leo was born. Chloe had called, sobbing, claiming she needed $5,000 to pay for a specialized acting workshop that was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I was tired up all night with a colicky Leo, and my patience was worn thin. I did something I had never done before. I checked. I called the acting school she mentioned. They had no record of her application, and the workshop she described didn't exist. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. She exploded. "Why are you investigating me? Don't you trust me? I can't believe how little faith you have in your own sister." The next day, my father called. He had given her the money. "She's just trying to find her way, son," he'd said, his voice laced with the familiar tone of weary resignation. "We have to support her." It was then that I realized the true nature of the system. I wasn't helping Chloe. I was propping up my parents' delusion. They couldn't bear the thought of their daughter failing, so they redefined her failures as finding her way and my success as a communal resource to fund the journey. After that day, I stopped giving her money. I set up a college fund for Leo and made it my financial priority. My refusal created a new dynamic. I became the villain, the cold-hearted brother who wouldn't help his struggling sister. Family dinners became minefields of passive-aggressive comments from my mother and pointed questions from my father about my expensive lifestyle. They never saw the irony in questioning the down payment on my modest house while they were funding Chloe's third trip to a yoga retreat in Costa Rica. The divorce had made it worse. When my ex-wife and I separated, my parents' immediate concern wasn't for me or Leo, but for how it would affect the family's image. My mother had even suggested that I give Chloe the spare bedroom in my new house. "She could help you with Leo," she'd said, "and it would save her some money on rent." The suggestion was so absurd, so completely detached from the reality of Chloe's irresponsibility, that all I could do was hang up the phone. This latest request for $30,000 was the most audacious yet. The business opportunity was, as always, shrouded in mystery. "It's a wellness brand," Chloe had explained vaguely. "A friend of a friend is launching it. I'd be a founding partner." When I asked for a business plan, a prospectus, even a website, she accused me of being unsupportive. Now, sitting in the quiet of my home while my son slept, I understood the finality of their recent action. Leaving Leo wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It was a strategic move, a carefully deployed weapon designed to inflict maximum emotional pain and force my compliance. It was the act of people who had run out of leverage and had resorted to terrorism. They thought it was their checkmate. But I had been building my defense for years, piece by piece, clause by clause. The protocol I had just activated with my attorney was the culmination of that quiet, methodical preparation. It wasn't a plan for revenge. It was a plan for restructuring. A plan to introduce a foreign element into my family's codependent ecosystem. Consequences. The morning after finding Leo, I took the day off. My first call was not to my parents, but to a child psychologist my firm had on retainer for community outreach projects. I explained the situation in calm, clinical terms. My son was left at school by his grandparents as a form of leverage in a family financial dispute. I need guidance on how to support him. Dr. Miller was clear and direct. Reassurance, routine, and honesty. He needs to know he is safe, that it was not his fault, and that you are his constant. Do not lie to him, but frame it in a way he can understand. Grandma and Grandpa made a big mistake because they were very upset about something that has nothing to do with you. I spent the morning with Leo. We built a sprawling city out of Legos, a miniature metropolis with parks, bridges, and a detailed public transit system. As we worked, I talked to him. "Yesterday must have been really scary," I began. He nodded, not looking up from the tiny skyscraper he was constructing. "Grandma and Grandpa were supposed to be there." "Yes, they were," I said. "And they made a very, very big mistake. They were angry with me about something, a grown-up problem, and they did something that was not okay. It was wrong, and it will not happen again. You're safe with me. Always." He finally looked at me, his brown eyes searching mine. "Are they in trouble?" "Yes," I said honestly. "Grown-ups have rules too, and when they break them, there are consequences." That seemed to satisfy him. He returned to his Legos, the crisis for now contained. My second call was to my attorney, David Shun. Protocol executed, he confirmed. "The letters will go out by certified mail today. Are you sure about this, Arthur? There's no walking this back." "I'm sure," I said. David was the architect of my contingency plan, something we had drafted after my father had, against my explicit advice, refinanced his home to give Chloe $20,000 for a jewelry-making business that folded in 6 months. The plan wasn't about seizing assets or filing lawsuits. It was far more elegant. My grandparents, my father's parents, had been farmers. They'd owned 100 acres of land an hour outside the city. It wasn't prime real estate, but it was beautiful, and it had been in the family for generations. When they passed away, they left the farm to my father and me as joint tenants with rights of survivorship, meaning that when one of us died, the other would inherit it whole. After my father refinanced his house for Chloe, I approached him with a proposal. "Dad, let's protect the farm," I'd urged. "Let's put it into a family land trust. It will protect it from creditors, from any future financial issues, and ensure it stays in the family for Leo and his cousins." He was reluctant, but he saw the wisdom in it, especially after Chloe's jewelry business failed and she declared bankruptcy, a fact my parents had hidden from the rest of the family. David Chun structured the trust with meticulous care. I was named the managing trustee, giving me operational control. My parents were named beneficiaries, entitled to enjoy the property and receive a small annual dividend from leasing the land to a local organic farmer. But there was a key clause, one David had called the behavioral covenant. It stipulated that if any beneficiary acted in a manner that caused demonstrable harm, physical, emotional, or financial, to another beneficiary, the managing trustee had the right to call a review and, with the consent of an independent arbiter, temporarily suspend their beneficiary status. At the time, I was a beneficiary. So was my father, and when Leo was born, I had him legally added. My parents had abandoned a 6-year-old beneficiary of the trust. They had caused him demonstrable emotional harm. They had violated the covenant. The certified letters David sent were not from a lawyer's office. They were formal notices from the Vance Family Land Trust, informing my parents that their status as beneficiaries was under review pending a formal hearing with the trust's designated independent arbiter, a retired judge and old family friend of my grandparents. The letter also informed them that, as per the trust bylaws, their access to the property and the disbursement of their next dividend were suspended until the matter was resolved. The dividend was not a large sum of money, only about $5,000 a year, but I knew it was money my parents counted on, especially now that my father's retirement fund had been decimated by Chloe. It wasn't a punishment. It was a process, a consequence. The first domino in a long, carefully arranged line. They thought they were punishing me by withholding their child care. They were about to discover I was in a position to withhold their legacy. The first call came from my father 3 days after the certified letter arrived. His voice was a mixture of confusion and indignation. "Arthur, what is this? Some kind of legal nonsense about the farm? Your mother is beside herself. It's a formal review process, Dad, as stipulated in the trust bylaws," I replied, my tone deliberately neutral, as if discussing a zoning variance at work. "You and Mom violated the behavioral covenant." "The what? This is absurd. We're your parents. We've been nothing but good to you. You left my 6-year-old son at his school for 2 hours, I said, the calmness in my voice a stark contrast to the memory of Leo's frightened face. "You caused emotional harm to a beneficiary of the trust. The covenant is clear." There was a sputtering on the other end. That was a misunderstanding. Your mother was upset. She forgot the time. It had nothing to do with Chloe's money. It was a weak, transparent lie. My father, a man I had once respected for his honesty, was now weaving fictions to protect my mother's malice. "The review will determine the facts," I said. "Judge Miller has scheduled a preliminary hearing for next month. David will send you the details." I could hear my mother yelling in the background. "Hang up on him, Frank. Hang up on that ungrateful boy." My father's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Son, just give Chloe the money. 30,000. I'll pay you back. We can make this all go away." It was heartbreaking. He was willing to bargain, to indebt himself further, to do anything but confront the actual problem. His and my mother's toxic enabling of my sister. "This isn't about the money anymore, Dad," I said softly. "It's about Leo. It's about consequences." I ended the call. An hour later, Chloe called. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "What did you do?" she shrieked. "Mom and Dad are freaking out about some letter from a lawyer. You're trying to steal the family farm, aren't you? I knew it. I knew you were always jealous of me." The projection was so profound, it was almost impressive. She, who had siphoned tens of thousands of dollars from our parents, was accusing me of theft. She, who had never worked a steady job in her life, was accusing me of jealousy. "The farm is in a trust, Chloe," I said, my voice weary. "It can't be stolen. It can only be managed according to its rules. Mom and Dad broke a rule. This is because of the 30,000, isn't it?" She spat. "You are so unbelievably selfish. You have so much, and you can't even help your own family. This business opportunity was real. You've probably ruined my life." "What was the business, Chloe?" I asked, a sudden curiosity cutting through my fatigue. "What was the 30,000 for, exactly?" It's a high-end, curated wellness retreat. My friend knows an investor." The story started to unravel as soon as she spoke it, the details vague and contradictory. I didn't press her. I didn't need to. I already knew she was lying. Before activating the protocol, I had made one other call to a private investigator I occasionally use for due diligence on large-scale development projects. I'd asked him to do a quiet, discreet background check on Chloe's financial situation. The preliminary report had landed in my inbox that morning. There was no wellness retreat. There was no business opportunity. Chloe had over $100,000 in debt, a mix of maxed-out credit cards, personal loans, and a significant, high-interest loan from an online lender known for its predatory practices. That loan, for exactly $30,000, was due in full in less than 2 weeks. She wasn't trying to build a business. She was trying to stop the wolves from breaking down her door. My family's emotional blackmail, their cruelty to my son, it wasn't for her future. It was for her past. A past full of secrets and failures they had all conspired to hide. They had abandoned my son not for a dream, but for a debt. The coldness of that truth settled deep in my bones. My resolve, already firm, hardened into something unbreakable. They hadn't just made a mistake. They had revealed who they truly were. The week before the hearing, my investigator, a no-nonsense ex-cop named Henderson, sent me his final report. It was a grim tapestry of financial desperation. Chloe hadn't just been irresponsible, she'd been reckless. The online loan was just the tip of the iceberg. She had a lien on her car, was 3 months behind on rent for her trendy downtown apartment, and had a string of unpaid medical bills from a cosmetic procedure she'd had done last year. The wellness brand was a complete fabrication, a story concocted to extract the $30,000 she needed to avoid a lawsuit from the online lender. But Henderson had found something else, something far more disturbing. He'd uncovered a series of emails between Chloe and my mother. In them, Chloe laid out her dire situation in stark detail. It was my mother who had devised the plan. "Tell Arthur it's a business investment," she had written. "He's a sucker for that sort of thing. If he says no, we'll have to put more pressure on him. He can't stand to see us worried." The most chilling email was sent the morning my parents were supposed to pick up Leo. "He's still not budging," my mother wrote. "Time for plan B. Don't pick up Leo from school today. The school will call him, he'll panic. A little scare will remind him where his priorities should be. With his family." It was all there in black and white. Premeditated. Malicious. Not a mistake. Not a moment of forgetfulness, but a calculated act of emotional warfare using a child as a weapon. Henderson's report also included a detail about my parents' finances that made my blood run cold. The loan Chloe was trying to pay off was not her first. A year prior, she had taken out a similar loan, and when she defaulted, my parents had paid it off. How? They had taken out a reverse mortgage on their home, the house I grew up in. They were draining the equity from their own home, their only major asset besides the farm trust, to service Chloe's endless stream of self-inflicted crises. They weren't just enabling her. They were bankrupting themselves for her. And now they wanted me to join them on that sinking ship. Armed with this new information, I instructed David Chun to subpoena my parents' and Chloe's financial records. It was an aggressive move, but a necessary one. I needed the full picture, the undeniable proof, for the hearing with Judge Miller. The hearing was held not in a courtroom, but in a quiet, wood-paneled office in Judge Miller's private arbitration practice. He was a contemporary of my grandparents, a man with a reputation for sharp intellect and homespun wisdom. My parents and Chloe arrived with a lawyer, a young, slick-looking man who seemed wildly out of place. My mother shot me a look of pure loathing as she sat down. My father wouldn't look at me at all. Chloe just stared at her phone. David and I sat opposite them. I placed a single, thick binder on the table in front of me. "Let's begin," Judge Miller said, his voice calm. "Mr. Vance, your petition claims a violation of the trust behavioral covenant. Please present your case." I stood and, in the same measured tone I used to present zoning proposals to a city council, I laid out the events of the past month. I spoke of the phone calls, the demand for money, and the subsequent abandonment of my son at his school. I presented the school's incident report and the letter from Dr. Miller, the child psychologist. My parents' lawyer tried to object, calling it a private family dispute. The moment a beneficiary of this trust was used as a pawn, it became a trust matter, Judge Miller countered without looking up from his notes. "Proceed, Mr. Vance." I then moved to the issue of intent. I presented the emails between my mother and Chloe, Henderson's report projected onto a screen for all to see. I watched my mother's face drain of color as her own words appeared in large, clear type. "Time for Plan B. Don't pick up Leo." Chloe sank lower in her chair. Their lawyer began to sweat. I concluded by presenting the evidence of my parents' reverse mortgage and Chloe's staggering debt. "This was not a request to fund a dream," I said, my voice finally allowing a sliver of the cold anger I felt. "It was an attempt to force me to service a debt created by years of recklessness, enabled by a pattern of destructive codependence. And when I refused, they weaponized my son. They violated the core principle of this trust, which was created to preserve and protect the family's future, not to finance its destruction." I sat down. The room was utterly silent. Judge Miller looked at my parents, his expression one of deep, profound disappointment. "Frank, Eleanor," he said, using their first names, "do you have any response to this?" My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. My mother just glared at me, her defenses shattered, left with nothing but impotent rage. Their lawyer, realizing the case was lost, simply shook his head. The system I had designed had worked perfectly. It had brought the truth into the light, and the truth was irrefutable. Judge Miller's decision was swift and decisive. He did not lecture or moralize. He simply applied the rules of the trust as they were written. "The evidence presented is clear and overwhelming," he announced, his gaze fixed on my parents. "Eleanor and Frank Vance, you have knowingly and intentionally caused emotional harm to a minor beneficiary of the Vance Family Land Trust. You have therefore violated the behavioral covenant as defined in Bylaw 12. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent room. "Effective immediately, your status as beneficiaries is suspended for a period of 5 years. This includes suspension of all property access rights and a forfeiture of all dividend disbursements during this period." My mother let out a strangled gasp. Chloe looked up from her phone, finally understanding the magnitude of what was happening. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "reinstatement after the 5-year period will be conditional. It will require a unanimous vote from the remaining beneficiaries of legal age, in this case, Arthur and Leo Vance, and proof that you have completed comprehensive family financial counseling. This is not a punishment. It is a safeguard designed to ensure the long-term viability and purpose of the trust, just as your parents intended." Their lawyers started to protest, but Judge Miller held up a hand. "This decision is binding and final, as per the arbitration agreement you all signed when the trust was formed. This hearing is adjourned." We all stood. My mother, her face a mask of disbelief, turned on Chloe. "This is your fault," she hissed. "All of it." Chloe burst into tears, and the two of them, along with their defeated lawyer, swept out of the room, a whirlwind of recrimination and drama. My father was the last to leave. He stopped in the doorway and finally looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, only a deep, bottomless well of shame. "Your grandfather," he said, his voice barely a whisper, He always said you were the wisest of us all. I should have listened. He then turned and shuffled out, a man broken by the consequences of his own weakness. David and I remained, gathering our papers. They'll lose the house, you know, David said quietly. Without the reverse mortgage payments supplemented by your support, and now, without the trust dividend, they won't be able to keep it. I nodded, a heavy feeling settling in my chest. I had known this was a possible outcome. That's their choice, David. It always was. And Chloe. Chloe will have to do something she has never done before, I said. She will have to save herself. The victory felt hollow, the way a necessary surgery does. The disease part had been removed, but the body of the family was left with a gaping wound. There was no triumph in it, only the grim satisfaction of having stopped the bleeding. That evening, I picked up Leo from his after-school robotics club. He was buzzing with excitement, showing me the small, clumsy robot he had built. He didn't ask about my day or the hearing. His world had already moved on, filled with circuits and code and the simple joy of creation. As we drove home, I made a decision. I called my real estate agent. Sarah, I said, I want you to find a small, 2-bedroom condo for rent near my parents' house. Something manageable on the ground floor. I want to prepay the first year's lease. David had said they would lose their house. He didn't say I had to let them become homeless. I could not fix their relationship with their daughter. I could not force them to be better grandparents. But I could offer them a lifeline, a safety net. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a planner's solution to a structural problem. A way to ensure a basic level of stability, not for their sake, but for mine. I needed to know that I had done everything I could, that I had acted not just with justice, but with a measure of grace. My father had taught me that, too. The fallout was swift. Chloe's lender filed a lawsuit, and with no family bailout in sight, she was forced to declare bankruptcy for a second time. She had to give up her apartment, sell her car, and move into a shared house with 3 other roommates. I heard through my sister-in-law that she had finally gotten a job, a real one, waiting tables at a chain restaurant. It was a harsh landing, but necessary one. Her safety net, woven from my parents' guilt and my past sense of obligation, was gone. My parents, as predicted, could no longer afford the mortgage on their large family home. They sold it for a loss in a buyer's market and, after a period of defiant refusal, silently accepted the prepaid lease on the small condo I had arranged for them. They didn't thank me. I didn't expect them to. The communication was a sterile email from my father. We have moved. This is our new address. I didn't push for more. The space between us was a chasm of their own making, and it was not my job to build a bridge across it. My focus was on Leo and on rebuilding our own small family unit. I re-engaged with my own life in a way I hadn't in years. With the constant background noise of my family's manufactured crises gone, I found I had more time, more energy. I took Leo on a trip to the Grand Canyon, something I'd always wanted to do. We went camping. I taught him how to fish. I was present for him fully and completely in a way I couldn't be when I was constantly bracing for the next emergency call from my mother. The farm, now solely under my stewardship, became our sanctuary. We would drive out on weekends, walking the fields that my great-grandfather had first tilled. I showed Leo the ancient oak tree his grandfather and I used to climb as boys. I leased a larger portion of the land to a young family who were starting a community-supported agriculture program. The farm was thriving, its purpose renewed, serving a new generation. One Saturday, about a year after the hearing, I was fixing a fence post at the edge of the property when a car pulled up. It was my father. He got out slowly, looking older and more frail than I remembered. He didn't approach me directly, but stood by his car, looking out over the rolling hills. "It looks good, son," he said after a long silence. "The new farmers are doing a fine job." "Yes, they are," I replied, not stopping my work. He watched me for a few minutes, the silence stretching between us. "Your mother, she asks about Leo sometimes." "I send her his school pictures," I said. It was true. I sent quarterly updates, a brief, impersonal email with a few photos and a short summary of Leo's activities. It was a courtesy, nothing more. "I know," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He took out a small, folded piece of paper. I found this when we were cleaning out the house. It was in your grandfather's old desk. He walked over and handed it to me. It was a letter written in my grandfather's spidery handwriting, dated a month before he died. Dear Frank, it read, you are a good man, but your heart is too soft for your own good. You see the best in your children, which is a blessing, but you must not let it blind you to their faults. A parent's job is not to clear the path for their child, but to give them the tools to navigate the rocks and thorns themselves. Arthur understands this. He is a builder. Trust him. He will keep the family's foundation strong. My father stood there, his eyes filled with a quiet, painful understanding. He knew, my father whispered. He knew all along. Yes, I said, folding the letter carefully. He did. It was the closest he would ever come to an apology. It wasn't everything, but it was something. A small crack of light in a long, dark tunnel. He got back in his car and drove away, and I went back to fixing the fence. 3 years after the suspension, my father passed away from a sudden heart attack. The funeral was a somber, awkward affair. My mother and Chloe sat on one side of the chapel, a small, isolated island of grief. I sat on the other with Leo, who was now a thoughtful 10-year-old. After the service, Chloe approached me. She looked different. The entitled petulance was gone, replaced by a weary hardness. I'm sorry about Dad, she said. It was the first time she had spoken to me in years. Me too, I replied. I'm trying to get my life together, she continued, fumbling with her purse. I've been sober for 6 months. I'm in a program. I'm paying back my debts, a little at a time. That's good, Chloe. I'm glad to hear that. I know I have no right to ask, she said, her voice dropping. But the 5-year thing with the trust, is there any way? I knew what she was asking. She wanted back in. She wanted the safety net she had so spectacularly burned. That's a decision for the beneficiaries to make when the time comes, Chloe, I said, my voice gentle but firm. And right now, there's only one other beneficiary who gets a vote. I glanced over at Leo, who was talking quietly with one of her cousins. The message was clear. Her future relationship with the family's legacy was no longer in my hands. It was in the hands of the child she had allowed to be harmed. Her path to redemption would have to go through him, and it would be a path she would have to earn step by painful step. She nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Okay, she said. I get it. It was a start. The following year, on the 4th anniversary of the suspension, my mother called me. It was the first time I had heard her voice since the funeral. Arthur, she said, her own voice thin and reedy. I would like to see Leo, if that's all right. I was silent for a moment, surprised by the request. Why now, Mom? I'm not well, she said simply. The doctors, it's my heart. I don't have much time. I don't want to die without seeing my grandson again. I took a deep breath. This was not a power play. This was not a manipulation. This was the raw, unvarnished truth. I can't make that decision for him, Mom, I said. He's old enough to decide for himself. I will ask him, and I will tell him it's okay with me if he wants to see you. The choice will be his. I talked to Leo that night. I explained the situation honestly and without pressure. Grandma is very sick, I said, and she wants to see you. You don't have to if you don't want to. What happened a long time ago was not your fault, but it was real. Whatever you decide is the right decision. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the robotics project on his desk. Will you come with me? He finally asked. Of course, I said. I'll be right there with you. The next Saturday, we drove to the small, sterile condo where my mother now lived. She looked like a stranger, frail and diminished, a shadow of the formidable matriarch who had once ruled our family. She didn't try to hug Leo. She just looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. You've gotten so tall, she whispered. Leo, in an act of grace that humbled me to my core, walked over and took her hand. I brought you something, he said. He handed her a framed picture he had taken with his new camera, a beautiful golden hour shot of the old oak tree on the farm. So you can remember, he said. My mother held the picture to her chest and sobbed, great, shuddering sobs of regret and loss. It was not a reunion. It was a release, a letting go of years of anger and pain, a quiet, imperfect end to a long and painful chapter. My mother passed away 2 months after our visit. In her will, She left her remaining personal effects to Chloe in a single, sealed envelope to me. Inside was not a letter, but a photograph. It was of her and my father on their wedding day, young, smiling, full of a hope that life had slowly eroded. On the back, in her elegant looping script, were 3 words, "He loved you." It was her final, cryptic message, an acknowledgement of the bond one had shared with my father, a bond she had tried and failed to break. With both my parents gone, the structure of the family shifted again. The 5-year suspension period on the trust became moot. According to the bylaws, upon the death of a beneficiary, their share was to be absorbed by the remaining beneficiaries. Everything now belonged to me and Leo, and would eventually pass to his own children. The family's legacy, the one I had fought to protect, was secure. A few months after my mother's death, I was reviewing the trust's quarterly financials when I noticed something odd. A new account had been set up, a small subtrust I didn't recognize. I called David Shun. "What is this, David?" "Ah," he said, "your father set that up with me about a year before he died. It was a private instruction. He funded it with the last of his personal savings. He stipulated that it was only to be revealed to you after both he and your mother had passed." David emailed me the trust documents. It was a small, modest fund, but its purpose was incredibly specific. It was a scholarship to be administered by me for a single recipient. The Chloe Vance Second Chance Scholarship, to be awarded to my sister if, and only if, she maintained 5 continuous years of gainful employment and sobriety and formally petitioned the trustee for educational funding. My father, even in his final years, was still trying to find a way to save her. But he had finally learned the lesson I had tried to teach him. He wasn't just giving her money. He was giving her an incentive, a goal, a structured path back. He had cleared away the enabling and replaced it with a framework for earned redemption. The following spring, I met Chloe for coffee. She was working as a manager at the restaurant where she had started as a waitress. She had been promoted twice. She showed me pictures of her new, tiny apartment, a place she was proud of because she paid for it herself. She looked healthier, clearer. We talked for an hour, not as the responsible brother and the problem sister, but as 2 adults who had survived a shipwreck. As we were leaving, I told her about the scholarship. I showed her the document. Her eyes filled with tears as she read my father's words. "He never gave up on me," she whispered. "No," I said. "He just learned how to help you in a way that actually helped." She told me she was thinking about going back to school, maybe for restaurant management. I told her that when she was ready, the money would be there. A decade after I found my son alone on my porch, I stood with him on the campus of a prestigious university, helping him move into his freshman dorm. He was studying engineering with a minor in robotics. He was a kind, brilliant, well-adjusted young man, my greatest achievement. The family trust, now managed by me and a professional board, had grown, its philanthropic footprint extending across the state. The farm was a thriving hub of sustainable agriculture. My relationship with Chloe was quiet but solid. She had finished her degree and was now a co-owner of a small, successful bistro. She never asked for another handout. She visited on holidays, and she was a loving, if slightly awkward, aunt to Leo. She was building her own foundation. One evening, Leo and I were talking on the phone. He was telling me about a complex systems theory problem he was working on for a class. "It's all about feedback loops," he explained, his voice alive with passion. "How a small, initial action can create a cascading effect that fundamentally changes the entire system. Positive loops reinforce growth, but negative loops, if they aren't interrupted, can lead to total collapse." I smiled, looking out my office window at the city I had spent my life planning. "Yes," I said, "I know a little something about that. I had interrupted the negative loop. I had weathered the collapse. And in the wreckage, I had built something better, something stronger, something that would last." My grandfather's words from his letter echoed in my mind. He is a builder. I had protected the family's foundation, not by preserving its broken structure, but by tearing it down to the studs and rebuilding it on a bedrock of accountability, consequences, and a hard-won peace.